Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
Tēnei e tuana ki te tāpiri atu aku mihi ki era I waihotia ki a koutou te Kawerau Maki te kei o te waka o Tainui. Ka nui te aroha ki tēnei tuahuatanga, kua tutuki koutou a koutou kreme, ara kia mōhio pai mai te take ki tā maki makaurau. Nō reiri roto I tērā tuahuatanga e tikana me mihi atu ki a koutou katoa I tai mai nei. Minister, can I first thank you for the opportunity to recognise in this particular instance your officials for OTS played a key and constructive role for the Select Committee. What they were able to achieve in a very delicate situation where there were some omissions were, I think, useful improvements to enable the relationship of Te Kawerau Maki with some local landowners there, but more importantly, a testament of their leadership and their place within West Auckland. Can I acknowledge too, Sir Bob, the relationship with Te Kawerau Maki goes way back, but of more recent times, to my knowledge, the relationship that you had accorded with Te Kawerau Maki under the former council certainly cemented, I think, a useful way of working with mana whenua in West Auckland under the new bigger council. So I also acknowledge Alf, Councillor, the Councillor for Auckland City Council, Alf Filipaina, your presence here today. Because that is a continuation of a relationship. Minister, when I grew up as a young spring chicken, we had wānanga, and in fact they were hosted by leaders of Te Kawerau Maki, and we grew up with the knowledge that Te Kawerau Maki held the northern boundary of Waikato, Tainui. We grew up listening to the rich histories and culture and whakapapa connections through Te Kawerau Maki and extensively to the northern part of the country. We grew up learning karakia, which were held by people in Te Kawerau Maki, and Te Wārena Taua is here. So I have to acknowledge his role in being a vessel of historical knowledge, traditional knowledge in our particular iwi. However, that said, vehemently, Te Kawerau Maki held on to their own sense of identity, recognising whakapapa connections, the history of the land, the migration of ancestors. They were able to not only share the broader knowledge within the iwi, but hold the specific knowledge within their own particular rohe. I heard in the opening of your speech, Minister, you made reference to the matter that Te Kawerau Maki neither had a marae or a urupa within their rohe, but when we were at the Select Committee, we heard clear evidence that there were matters yet to be resolved in relation to Te Kōpironui. And I want to take from a submission the representation that we had word for word so that it is in the Hansard and recorded as a notable point before the Select Committee. And although we couldn't determine the outcome, which I think in some vain hope might have been the prospect that people were seeking, that was not our role. And unfortunately, we could not do that. But here, as the Select Committee heard it, was the particular interest in relation to Te Kōpironui. Te Kawerau Maki have a long-standing interest in the Woodhill Forest area, and in particular, the land blocks commonly referred to as Kōpironui. Our founding ancestor, Tawhia ki te Rangi, lived at Kōpironui and is buried at the Kawerau Wāhi Tapu, Hautū, an urupa which is situated on Kōpironui B2E2. Many of our ancestors are also buried there. Kōpironui contained important cultivation, several significant pā and wāhi tapu. These lands were occupied by our ancestors right down to the time when the Crown began to take the land from us in 1920. Kōpironui is an old kāinga of our people and is of immense cultural significance to Te Kawerau Maki that our tupuna buried our dead on the land. This is the land we have always regarded as our own, and we regularly, frequently pay our respects. In the 1934 and 1951 taking of these lands from my grandmother and other of our old people by the Crown meant that Te Kawerau Maki were unable to access resources or the West Coast to collect seafood. Under the agreement in principle signed by the Crown and Te Kawerau Maki, the Kōpiro Nui lands were to be transferred as part of our settlement. Following an objection, this redress was removed from Te Kawerau Maki settlement package and was ultimately replaced with the process set out in Part 2 of the bill. The objection to the inclusion of the Kōpiro Nui lands in the settlement package was disappointing, given the good faith agreements we had reached with the Crown and neighbouring iwi. I read this out as an extract from the submission that the Select Committee heard from the Te Kawerau Iwi Tribal Authority, simply to act as a po, because this matter is yet to be determined. It will rely on numerous amounts of evidence and statements, but the Select Committee heard this evidence. I make reference to it because within the context of the treaty settlement process and the principles by which the Minister applies that process, it wasn't able to be resolved by a particular Select Committee. The second point I'd like to make reference to is the one of the constructive outcome to allow vehicle access to the Hari family in particular on the Tehinga site. This was a matter that was considered very carefully by the Select Committee. They indeed were asking for permanent easement rights. The Select Committee considered that, but on weight, believed that the nature of the enduring relationship between the Hari whānau to their land, but also with Te Kawerau Maki to negotiate after 30 years another access provision would be a way of cementing the relationship. And that was seen in terms of the spirit of treaty settlement to be a more sustainable way to achieve an outcome. It wasn't what the Hari family asked for, but the Select Committee, I believed in good conscience, wanted to balance the interests of Te Kawerau Maki and the Hari whānau, and I'm so pleased with the good grace of consideration that an outcome here was able to be determined. For Mr Bellamy, his submission was a little bit more straightforward, as he did have a legal easement agreement with DOC. It was a simple omission that the Select Committee had heard had not been included within the context of the settlement. And again, with the good grace of consideration by Te Kawerau Maki, that was able to be affirmed as well. The third point, Mr Speaker, that I would like to comment on before I finish is the nature of Te Kawerau Maki's interest in the Auckland Isthmus. And with the brief time available to me, it is useful to make reference to the way in which the city is developing, but also the relationship with the Auckland Council, the largest council of our country. And I hope that these types of settlements, in particular, because we're talking about Te Kawerau Maki today, provide useful and strong and enduring relationships at a political level and at a more functional level with the Auckland City Council. Because as that city continues to grow and mana whenua are affirming what their interests are in our largest city, we cannot but help to hope that the vibrant nature of Auckland will be reflected in the future development of that city, which is our largest Polynesian city in the South Pacific. And that is what a settlement such as this affords us, is the opportunity to identify now who can legitimately have those interests reflected within the Tamaki Isthmus. Nō reira, ka tira, he nui ngā kōrero engari he poto te wā. Ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa I raro I te tuenui o tēnei tā koutou whare, tā tātou whare. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
I call